You need to see me without my top on down the bottom end.
What? I don't want to see that.
One end of my torso was what I meant.
Right, got ya.
Should we move on?
Yeah, let's do that.
We're a group of normal people, all trying to figure out how to follow Jesus in the 21st century. Despite this thing that unites us, we all have very different views on church, religion, life, and faith. We want to invite you into our conversations so that you too can hear new perspectives, unique ideas, and see that it's okay to be honest about your faith. Welcome to our podcast. One, two, three.
That was terrible.
You two are bang on in time for me. Was I out or what? From your perspective,
I thought I don't want to name any names, but
it was out.
There's only for me. It was Steve.
Was it? See, this internet lag is all over the show.
Well, it is what it is. It is.
Anyway, welcome everyone to episode 2 of Another Christian Podcast. So, how have you guys been this week?
Yeah, good. Trying to think about what's happened since last week. Lots, but nothing, if that makes any sense. In this crazy pandemic universe that we're living in at the moment.
I asked Steve.
Lots, but nothing.
I asked Steve to come up with some really elaborate story to make something sound really interesting. Have you come up with anything, Steve?
Go.
No.
Oh.
So I told you I wouldn't.
He did.
The weeks are just getting longer as well. That's what I'm finding. They're just getting longer and days are merging into one another.
It feels like the equivalent of that period between Christmas Day and New Year. Do you know what I mean? It's that period where you're like, what day is it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's but not with slightly without the depression of Christmas is over.
Yeah, you're right. It's completely throwing me this whole. I never really know what day we're on.
Yeah,
strange. I'm very achy. I've tried this.
Achy. Why achy?
Well, I've had a bit of revelation.
Oh no.
Oh dear.
So I am about to hit 30.
Yes, you are.
And I was doing some sort of exercise, and I really, really, really badly ached to the point where I could not walk for like a couple of days afterwards. That type of ache. I mean, I could walk, but not properly. And all it was like a 20-minute, Joe Wicks HIIT exercise thing.
Oh, I did that.
Did you? How did you find it?
Yeah. My legs caned. Horrific.
Yeah.
Horrific. I thought first of all I'll do PE for kids because that's nice and easy, right?
So was the PE for kids the one that made you ache?
Well, I forgot how much I hate PE, and actually why I forgot my kit every week.
Yeah.
And
although you don't have that problem at home.
No, but I suddenly lost internet connection and couldn't watch YouTube anymore. So then I tried his 15-minute exercise for beginners.
Yeah.
And my legs were just sore beyond belief for the next 2 days. I did it one more time and I just can't be bothered anymore.
Yeah. Well,
perseverance.
Yeah, I had this similar kind of outcome. Although we have this thing in our family that we call full balls in, don't we, Dan?
Yeah, we do. Although there's still a discrepancy, I think, in between the boys' usage of it, because I could never work out whether Tom is saying four,
no,
as in like 4 balls, or full, as in all.
Yeah,
I've always understood the phrase to mean all of your being, everything that you are, not for
Yeah, you're right.
balls.
Yeah, but the point of it is that you, whatever you do for some stupid reason, you not always for good. It sounds like an honourable thing, but it's not always. Where you kind of you throw yourself into everything. So I did I don't know why, I found Joe Wick's like extreme hit fat burner.
Oh my goodness!
For my first one, and it was so. I felt like I was gonna like die. It was really bad.
Do you know what the worst part of it is? Sorry, the worst part of it is he is so cheerful and so upbeat, and it's just like I just no. I need you to be mean. I need you to be grumpy and as moody as I am right now that I'm doing any exercise, instead of being like, oh yeah, let's do some Spider-Man thing and doing that, which is like absolutely just want to punch him in the face.
Yeah, but if you're watching the PE one, Steve, he's got to be relatively chirpy, isn't he?
Yeah, these are kids, Steve.
He was even chirpy with the beginners ones as well, and no, I don't do chirpy.
No, that's true.
Not when it's exercise.
Just don't do chirpy.
No, you don't. My revelation was, that I'm hitting 30 and I'm developing a bit of a dad bod. And I thought, if I don't do something about it now, and
you've change my,
if I don't change my lifestyle now, it's gonna be downhill. How did you handle that when you hit 30, Steve?
Well, the dad bod that suddenly developed when I turned 30.
Like overnight.
Yeah, I came to terms with it when I was 21, I think. Losing hair, growing a belly, not being able to get up off my knees when I sat on the floor. 30 was a gradual ease in from the age of 21. It was great.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
So I've just decided that I need to start introducing some lifestyle change. So the last week has been me trying to exercise more, eat less rubbish, which I didn't realise how much rubbish I actually sometimes eat until you do. Like, have you ever done calorie counting? Anyone?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I've done it. It's a nightmare.
Isn't it a surprise? Like, some of the most simple things that you think, that can't be that bad, you realise that it's like loaded with calories. Like bread.
Yeah. It's not even just the count. It's not the counting. It's the expense as well. Like the high calorie foods tend to be the cheapest, right? It's one of those unfortunate situations where all your best intentions are thwarted by your financial situation.
Yeah.
It's like healthiness is the province of the rich. At least it feels that way when you're trying to eat clean. What are you eating now?
I'm trying to go more like just. It's less of eating something particular. It's just not eating certain things. Like, you're not trying to eat sweet stuff and dropping the size of portions of things.
Stop drinking cream.
Yeah, that habit I've got is quite difficult to drop. But like.
Yeah, but that is actually a habit. I remember that as a kid, that you would like
what?
Whenever, it was the condensed milk.
Yeah,
actually,
condensed
wasn't it?
milk, yeah, which is different from cream.
Yeah, and that's it.
That was amazing though.
It is, but I would imagine a similar calorie count.
Similar calorie.
Yeah, well, there you go. So, so what have you?
Steve looks confused.
What have you bought?
Go on, Steve.
I'm just utterly confused about condensed milk. What was the condensed milk thing you were about?
It was.
Oh, he used to just take it straight off. So we used to serve it as kids as like a thing that would go on desserts
Instead of cream.
But if you instead of cream, but if you weren't quick, then Jamie would have it, the whole tin. It's just that straight off the bat.
It does taste amazing, to be fair. If you ever have it with like strawberries.
Yeah. Well, I didn't
great.
know because you drunk it all.
Yeah, it's really good.
You would just drink it before it got poured on people's food.
I'm not sure. I can't remember that.
Well, I may be embellishing slightly, but I certainly remember there being a particular incident where he consumed an entire can in one sitting. Maybe that just got like played over every incident of.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Milk.
Anyway, so that's me.
No wonder you're so fat.
Yeah.
We'll have none of the shaming here, Steve.
No, I do
Sorry.
space.
I do feel like
Shaming the one who has no fat on him whatsoever from the one who has lots of fat on him.
you see me without my top on down the bottom end.
What? I don't want to see that.
Bottom end of my torso was what I meant. Anyway,
Right, got ya.
should we move on?
Okay.
This
Yeah,
is
let's
going
do
somewhere I don't like.
So I sent you both. I don't know if you had a chance to read this. Have you had a chance to read this article I sent you?
Yeah, I read it.
I skimmed it.
You skimmed it. Okay. So it's an article from the Telegraph. I don't read the
Australia.
Telegraph, just to say that, yeah. But it came up on my LinkedIn feed, I think. And it's called "Can All the Lockdown Motivators Get Lost?" And I'll just give you a little overview. I'll read a little bit of it. So this is from someone called Kerry Parnell. Parnell? What do you reckon?
I'm going with Parnell.
Parnell. So it says, can all the lockdown motivators get lost? The last thing any of us is going to come out of this with is a new skill. So then she goes on to say, to date, I've not written a word of my best-selling novel. I have not learnt a new language, unless you count imaginative swearing substitutes in front of my kids. I have not Mary Kondoed so much as my cutlery drawer. Does anyone know who Mary Kondo is? Do you know her?
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah.
Do you not, Steve?
Oh, Steve.
You need to look
Come
into
on,
that.
mate.
You really do. I've not learned to
I hate
meditate.
when people do that.
What?
Do what?
Have you heard of them? No. Oh, you need to look into them.
You-
Well, why don't you just tell me? Because you clearly have.
Okay, so she's this lady who, you have like Super Nanny, or
Oh, yeah.
who people that come into your life and help you to sort it out in various ways.
Life coaches.
Yeah, but she's all about clutter and about how all like the feng shui stuff. Is that fair, Dan?
Okay.
Yeah, whole thing about joy, isn't it? Does it spark joy in you? If it doesn't, burn it.
Yeah. So you go through your clothes. Does this one make you happy? No. Right, let's get rid of it. It's kind of a bit about minimalism and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she says, I have not Mary Kondoed so much as my cutlery drawer. I haven't learnt to meditate or had candlelit date dinners. I've not planted vegetables or come up with $1 billion business plan, etc., etc., etc. She says, what I have done, though, is to desperately attempt to combine working from home with homeschooling and entertaining my kids, take a daily plod along the same route we've trodden for weeks, cook seemingly endless meals and worry about needing a seemingly endless supply of food while becoming increasingly paranoid about going to the shops. And then she talks a lot more in the article, but kind of to summarise it, she says, so to the motivational gurus like the Goon, who posted on Twitter that if you don't come out of this quarantine with a new skill, business or knowledge, you didn't ever lack the time, you just lack the discipline, can quite simply do one. And then she says, if you come out of this with your sanity, then you're winning. So I don't know whether... I mean, the article is trying to challenge, I guess, this narrative that's kind of going around at the moment. It certainly is in my kind of world on social media of really creative people using this time really wisely and kind of coming up with really creative ways to carry on doing their thing and to, be really productive. And I wonder whether, is that the same for you? Have you felt any pressure to do that as well? And what do you just think of the article?
What level do you want us to come at this from? Because there's so many levels to this. Like the article was basically it was the whole thing was humorous, but it had something underneath it, right? Mm-hmm. So I suppose you could talk about it from that angle, that just the funny, like the foibles that you discover about how you structure your life. So that could be quite trivial and silly, but I suppose you could also come at it from a theological angle if you are wanting to do that at some point through this. It's up to you. Where do you want us to start?
Let's just start with it. Start with the human stuff initially, or the basic stuff.
I think it's largely, well, for me, I speak for me. It's a personality thing. It's like I feel that pressure internally more than from any external thing. I'm fully aware that the drive on social media is towards productivity, but I don't need any additional pressure from people. I probably could compete with the best of them in terms of like driving for productivity out of my time. And so actually the reminder in all of this has been the counter that I need to not push it. But the trivial stuff has been funny, like just how quickly I can get irritated when I can't finish a task because there's been an obstruction. You know, something like that. But some of that is, I suppose, I just need to learn to pay attention to, because those obstructions are generally, or distractions perhaps, are from people, and that's precious.
You set out a bit of a, I don't know if it's fair to say a task, Steve, but I remember you saying that you had all these books you're going to read.
I've set a goal for the year of how many books I'm going to read, which has remained the same. I'm not changing it just because I'm now inside more frequently. I'm just reading the number of books I want to read. If anything, my goal was to brush up on biblical languages before I finish seminary, and that's been pretty productive. But I'm not putting pressure on myself to do it. I think there has been pressure in terms of people expecting you to do something amazing and novel, and to do something that will be kind of really fulfilling over these weeks. And I don't know, I'm more cynical, and I just kind of go, well, I just don't buy into it. Fine if that's what you want to do, but yeah, I'm kind of. It's probably going to turn into a rather boring podcast because I don't really care enough. Well,
the thing is, if I was really honest, I got to admit to being a little bit jealous of your position, Steve.
Why?
Because I think I probably have brought into this idea of this time as something you're never going to get again, and really wanted to use this really productively. So like I had all these big ideas of things I wanted to try and achieve over this period. Like I was going to learn a new language, and I was going to spend a significant amount of time on a new part of the business that I would want to develop and that type of thing. But none of those things have happened. And a lot of that is due simply to the fact of having a family and children confined to the same space that you're trying to work in. And obviously the kids haven't been at school for however many weeks now. So it actually works out that I've got much less time to work and to do some of these things than I did before this whole thing happened. And obviously I'm really thankful to have a family and all that kind of thing, but I tried to watch a YouTube video the other day. There was like 5 minutes and it took about 7 hours throughout the day to be able to actually sit and watch it all.
There is a temperance thing there, because like maybe this is, I know, jumping back to you talking about being 30, that I think there is a gradual shift in your worldview or the way you see time. As you know, our whole language, it's interesting, like our whole language is productivity, right? So we say making use of time as if it's a commodity that should be turned into a product, like it's something, rather than it being. So that, again, this is where the theological side of my thinking wants to kick in and say maybe time's a gift to be enjoyed rather than a product or an ingredient that we have to do something with all the time. But I do get the impulse. Like I feel what you're saying. Sorry, Steve. Go on. What were you going to say?
No, I think the question I've got is: are you jealous of my not caring about being achieving something wildly ambitious over this time, or jealous that I'm single and on my own?
Bit of both.
I just genuinely,
yeah.
I didn't know what you were getting at.
Yeah, a bit of both, to be honest.
This does go public.
That's fine. I'm sure Anna definitely knows this. The impulsiveness, which both of you know about me, especially. Yeah, Steve says I've got some sort of issues.
Big issues.
But like, I just
love your relationship. I just love how honest you are.
Yeah. Well,
you have issues. Like, you have some serious problems.
Well, like, if I've got I've brought domain names and hosting plans at 3-4 o'clock in the morning before, because I've had like an idea in my mind of a business I wanted to start, and I've just had to get out of bed and do it right there and then. So
can't sleep.
Like, I can't
until
sleep.
It's done.
Yeah, I can't sleep until it's done.
So that's messed up.
Yeah. So if I've got like this idea of something I want to go and do, that's all I can really think about. So trying to look after kids who are trying to, obviously they're kids, so want you to go play and do all these things. I just find really difficult when I've got stuff in the back of my mind, and especially in this time when lots of people are saying about how creative they're being. I've got lots of those ideas.
So how are you feeling about then quarantine? I know you've mentioned like 7 hours to watch a YouTube video, but is the chief emotion frustration for you that you haven't been able to do something? Or is it a realisation that frustration is possibly not healthy? Or maybe even a mix of both?
Yeah, to be honest, mainly frustration, I reckon, because already, like, this isn't the end of it yet, but already I'm looking back and thinking I've wasted some of this time. So there's definitely a frustration there. I guess it's also something around the position that my business is in as well at the moment. So it's relatively new, like 2.5 years. So I need to be doing things to keep it going. And just to stop for 3 or 4 months is not going to be great. So perhaps if my business was further along, and was kind of much more self-sufficient, then perhaps I could just forget about work and focus on the family. Which, by the way, I'm also really thankful that this is an opportunity that I'm never going to get again as well, of spending time with the family, which is really important. And I've made it sound like I don't care about them at all. I do. It's been amazing, but it's complicated, isn't it?
But that's why I say I think that personality is a huge element of this. I don't think there's a right or wrong way of managing the whole dynamic, because there are so many variables at play. Like, you know, you are a parent, so that's one large variable, which can be broken down into a subset of issues, because you've got a particular two children in front of you, and you're married, and there's that relationship. You work from home, so there are a whole host of things that make for a very unique situation. And then when you overlay your personality on that, I don't think people should come at... And that was the humour in the article, I think. The recognition that there's a baseline in all of this that says if you come out with it with sanity, you've done it. You've done okay. Like, that's that's where we should all be aiming, because the potential for this to push us over the edge is quite high. Precisely because of that productivity pressure.
Also, if you come out of this alive, that's also pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, I say that flippantly, but like, if you come away from this situation annoyed that you didn't use the time productively, then you're probably not thinking particularly clearly, because what you did do was keep you and your family safe.
Yep.
Which is obviously much more important than any kind of productivity that you could have
absolutely
experienced in this time, really.
Yep.
It's not really very considerate of the people that have had much worse time of it than you have.
I think this, the thing is, this isn't a public bank holiday for 6 weeks and more. This is measures under health reasons. And so, actually the things that the priorities people should be having who are in family situations should be with their families and the health of their family unit, and then their neighbours and other family members extending that. I think it's really interesting that I can totally understand the wanting to have no interruptions in your day to be productive in business and things. I think that's a very natural thing. I think you would struggle in other ways because I think we've all got this tendency of looking on the other side. Grass is always greener, and what I'm discovering just about myself is that I'm an extrovert. Because
interesting.
I get energy from being around people, and actually not being around people is quite exhausting for me at the moment.
Right. So
in these last few weeks,
if I asked you a question, if I asked you like 6 months ago, are you an introvert or an extrovert? What would you have said then?
I probably would have tended towards introvert 6 months ago in terms of understanding myself. I was talking to a friend on the phone the other day, and I said to him, I've learned I'm a extrovert, getting energy off other people. Because I hadn't actually known that distinction, by the way. And he was just like, well, yeah, you used to be a street preacher. Like, maybe that's why. Like, who would have thought? I've discovered kind of actually, I've never been in this flat so long, ever.
Right.
I'm not in this flat ever. Yeah.
Do you know what one of the funniest things that Steve said to me about this whole thing? We were talking about finances while we're in lockdown. And he said, it's funny, I'm spending much more money now on food because I'm not at your house in the evenings. I said, well, that's funny because our bill has gone down quite significantly since you've not been here.
That's hilarious. Yeah,
probably true.
So you're discovering that you actually don't necessarily like being by yourself constantly.
I wouldn't say that. I do get peopled out. And I do, like everyone does. And so actually having space of my own is really, really good. Love it. And I totally see all the benefits of it. And why someone who's stayed in with children under, 12, for 5 weeks, is kind of going, I wish I was over there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm kind of going, oh wow, I didn't realise I was out of this space as often as I am, and so yeah, it's just bizarre, and so it's kind of going, oh yeah, and then I'm in the day finding it a struggle to be motivated in certain areas, and I'm like, what normally boosts me, oh that's it, being around people usually boosts me and motivates me to work. So yeah.
So going forward, when or if the lockdown measures are dropped or decreased, is that going to impact the way that you go about your normal life, do you think? You can do anything different? Yes and no. I think I'm going to appreciate being around people much more, and knowing that I kind of get energized by being around them. I think I'm going to be more deliberate and I don't know, more in the
sounds so cliched and disgusting, but more in the moment, as I'm with people, consciously, kind of going, this is good for me. Not all right. When am I going to go? But at the same time, I think as well, not being out as often as I am as well, and kind of, because I've really also kind of appreciated some of the more quieter moments where I've been more reflective.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's great.
Mm.
So basically, I want to be you want to be me. A little bit.
Sometimes.
Do you guys need to
just without the obsession?
Do you guys need to do like a breakout room? I mean, I can give you 5 minutes.
No, we're good.
You're good?
Yeah.
Great.
How about you, Dan? Is there anything particular you'd say you've learned about yourself in this so far? By the way, I hate that question. It's cheesy.
That's all right. No, it's fine. So I can resonate with what Steve's saying, because I think it's easy to go to the extreme, isn't it? And say, I am absolutely an introvert, or I'm absolutely an extrovert. And I think it's rare, possibly even impossible, to find someone who sits at such an extreme level that they're absolutely one thing. There's clearly a spectrum and a diversity about how we deal with one another and social space and energy and rest and all of the things that, in the dynamic here. For me personally, I think the takeaway lesson so far is the importance of memory. So there's a bit of a backstory here. So one of the projects that I've been working on, I found that the reduction of like pastoral visiting and some of the ministry that is part of my day-to-day life because of being out and about in the community has been significantly reduced. Therefore, the tasks that have been pushed to the bottom of the list have naturally risen to the top. And one of the more enjoyable tasks that I've been committing some time to fairly regularly over the last 6 weeks has been just recording an audio version of the church's history, and just spending an hour every few days just recording a chapter or so. And
coming to you soon on Audible.
Yeah, coming to you soon. So I was struck by the ministry that the church enjoyed and received during the war years, and the impact that ministry have, and like the longevity of that ministry. And it just got me thinking about memory, and it's like, how significant does an event have to be within a society for it to have an impact in the way that life is lived? It's like, is 6 weeks, say the lockdown ends in another 3 weeks, so what's that, 9 weeks, right? Is 9 weeks of altered practice really enough to linger in the memory of a society to impact lasting change? And if so, how long will that change last for? Like, is it a period of time within the lived experience of the people that were in it? Is it a memory that goes beyond? Like, it's interesting to me that we're at a stage where arguably at a political level, we're starting to forget the lessons of the First and Second World War, just at the time when those generations, the lived memory is now, or the kind of living memory, I should say, is dying. And I'm just wondering what the impact of that is with regard to this season and this period of time. So that's what I'm thinking about, is how long can I retain this impulse? Almost like a New Year's resolution, you hit like February, March, and it starts to wane. All the decisions you made during that period, you're like, oh, I'm not sure whether I can hold on here. So that's what I'm thinking about. So what would it take? I really hope that we all learn the value of, in Christian terms, I would say, I hope we just rediscover the gift of Sabbath in some way, the gift of holy rest, That would be something, and I mean that at a societal level, but particularly for churches, because I think we haven't been good models, and ministers in particular. Sorry to keep using the word particular, but I think I know this in myself, is that I've wanted to set set an example about productivity and energy and motivation and movement and all that stuff. And actually, that's quite exhausting for some people that just they need to rest. So that it's just recalibration, I suppose. Is something I'm taking away.
Yeah. Do you know, I could kind of see it going both ways. You know, it's almost like, you know, those kids in like really strict church upbringings. We know lots of those who, when they're released, just go absolutely mental. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So as a society, it could either go, we've learned some really valuable lessons there. There's things that we don't want to return back to. You know, let's remember that time. Or it's just going to be an absolute carnage.
Free for all. Yeah. But is that maybe the real commitment of work in this time, is the investment that says I've got to shoulder this as an individual. I can't be responsible for what the community out there is going to do when we're released, but I can make some decisions for me and my family, which I think is what you're saying is like for yourself. You've made a massive discovery in this balance between the importance of family life. You like the old ad. I know it's cliche, but so Steve will love this. But when you die, you know your deathbed moments are not going to be the businesses you did or didn't start. Like I think that's a cold-hearted person to make that the priority. It's not to say those things aren't important, engaging, and life-giving, but the real stuff is going to be your family, your friends, your community. Yeah, that. And I think this is a gift.
Well, I think I'd like to push back on it because I think there's one thing that I'm just hating about all of this time, and I don't like it normally anyway in our culture, and our culture is massively big on it, is moral posturing. And I think there's a great danger that we come out of this and there are people who this time has not been a gift for them. This has been actually torture for them. And they want to go back to normal life, and then people are going to judge them for doing that. And I think there's a real danger in moral posturing about how people return to things. And I do, you know, for me, there's some things that I'll be taken away and going, you know, I'm going to remember that, and this will be a time that's etched in my mind, I think, for the rest of my life. And I don't know how it will change me long term. But what I want to not do is just go, all right, people have come out of this, and this almost, I don't know, I think there can be a romantic idea of this lockdown as well, which is going to lead me down a massive rabbit hole of other things as well. But
go on.
Well, I think they're already trying to do it in the terms that they're using to compare it to a war and wartime Britain. And though I think this is the biggest crisis the country's faced since wartime, this isn't a war. We don't have fallen heroes. We don't have people who've made sacrifices. We have all of this language that's being used that is a sentimentalizing of these times and a romanticizing of these times. So we have Matt Hancock saying today on a daily briefing, fallen heroes of the NHS, we will remember them. Fine. I want us to remember those people who have died because of a lack of PPE and a lack of resources and a lack of preparation. But to then equate them with soldiers who died during World War II, and to say we will remember them in that way is it's a we're going to put this memorial up, and I think it's so that we don't think about actually the horrible stuff that's gone on during this. It's a remembering so that we also forget.
That's an interesting phrase.
It's an Alan Bennett. It's an Alan Bennett phrase from History Boys. Okay. Just so you don't think I'm being really clever and using my own ideas.
No, I thought it was really wonderfully poetic.
Yeah, not from my head.
No, that's an interesting thing. I think I hear what you're saying. I guess again, there's this strange mix of things going on where you've got the sentiment of the families that have lost loved ones to this in a mode of loss that is arguably preventative, and I say it's arguably because the debate is going to like inquiries are going to, all of that stuff's is forthcoming, I'm sure. But then you're right, the large scale narrative that could be told that will rose tint or paint over some of those things that have occurred that we'd prefer to cast from our minds because they didn't paint us in a good light. You know, I think that it's the mode of remembrance that wants to say, didn't we clap for the NHS? But not the mode of remembrance that wants to say, oh yeah, but we were quite unhappy about funding them beforehand. Yeah. You know, well, it's that hypocrisy, I suppose. If you want to use strong language, I mean, I'm wanting to kind of be careful because in the end, I don't think individuals make decisions that are that clear cut. But I hear what you're saying, and I think it's worth reflecting on. How will we remember this time? Not purely as one or the other.
I think I'm just always wanting to look at things and look at them realistically, and I'm just
some would say cynically.
Cynically, yeah, okay, I'm a cynic, but I do think there's all of this romanticizing and everything kind of has created an awful lot of moral posturing, and actually I think it's dangerous because you know, you've got it only takes one kind of person who's been swept along by it all to kind of go, you know, so you can feel it with it, for example, the breaking of rules or the breaking of the things, whatchamacallit. What are they called?
Curfews.
Are they rules?
Isolation.
Restrictions.
There we go. We got it.
And like, you can feel literally, I sometimes think it's palpable, people's disdain for those who have dared to go and just do something that they've decided is not what they should be doing. So constantly social media, I've got a garden and stay at home. And it's like, well, what about all those people who don't have gardens?
Yeah. Yes.
How dare these people go and sit in parks in London? Well, have you seen how many tower blocks there are in London? Like, and I you know, I'm speaking to someone who lives in London, and I don't myself live in London, but I kind of go, I worry about that because I think that very quickly does turn into mob mentality, and that mixed with moral posturing can become a dangerous mix.
So I just wanted to read you a bit of an article from Christian Post. I don't ever read the Christian Post, by the way, just to say that. But a few podcasts I've listened to have referenced this because it's kind of causing a bit of controversy. I'd just be interested to see what you guys think. You mentioned the word gift earlier on, Dan, and the title of this article is Francis Chan identifies the purpose behind COVID-19, saying this is a gift to you. And I'll go on and I'll read a little bit of the article. And just to make clear, the article is referencing a YouTube video that Francis Chan has posted on his YouTube channel. So Francis Chan has suggested that God might be using the COVID-19 pandemic as a way to humble humanity and connect with his people and encourage Christians to view this time of rest as a gift. He goes on to say, so many of us have the tendency where we want to control our lives. We don't want to spend our time in this intimacy with God we have things to do. So we go and we run and we run and we run. I bet in January you had projections for this year. God says even when you try to control your life, you're not in control. Don't you understand there's something about how right now he just caused every single treadmill to stop? So he basically just goes on and says that God wants to humble us and show us that we can't control our lives. So he says maybe this time of isolation has a purpose. And the purpose is he wants to be with us. He's just saying, stop running. I'm just going to stop you for a while because I want to. Because I, Almighty God, want to be with you. And I want to connect with you. This is a gift to you. So it's interesting that that's caused a lot of controversy. I guess primarily around the fact that the inference there is that Francis Chan is saying that God has caused the coronavirus for some sort of purpose. Now, obviously, this is going into the realms of massive questions like sovereignty and how God interacts with the world and things. So I know we're not going to be able to touch the sides of this in the time we have, but I guess just quickly, what do you kind of think of the article? And are you comfortable with the idea of this being a gift? You used the word gift earlier on, Dan. What do you kind of mean by that?
I'll let Steve have first blood on this, I think.
It's an interesting one. I think it brings up various questions. As you said, I don't see how it's too different from what C.S. Lewis said, where he said that pain is God's megaphone to rouse a deaf world. I don't think it's as controversial as maybe some think it is. But I also kind of question whether it's as straightforward as that. I've just been reading Ecclesiastes this week, and I was just seeing Ecclesiastes time and death being the framework for the world we live in. Time's constantly going. There's frustration in this world. There's all of these things, and I just be hesitant to kind of say it's a gift from God to I don't know, if I'm honest. I'm struggling. Dan, what do you think?
I think you're always going to be on shaky territory when you attribute absolute intentions to God, because I mean, who can perceive what God may be doing? Far be it from me to question C.S. Lewis. The man had the mind of a planet. But I'm uneasy with the idea that we would intentionally cause our loved ones pain, even to teach them and train them, I think there's a set of questions there that need nuance and exploration, and I think worthy of a longer conversation. So I'll raise it and park it. I think the thing for me is it could be a gift. I think that's the level of nuance I want to inject into this, because for me it's like I hold my personal view about how God interacts with the world, which is again one of the ones that Jamie's saying, let's potentially hold this, is that I think there is always possibility. There's possibility in what God wants to do, and invites us in some participatory manner to consider what reaction we might have to a course of events. And as a result, I think it could be a gift. But there's certainly, as you've already referenced, for some, this is absolutely not. And to use a blanket absolute and just like deem everyone's situation as at this level, like for everyone this is a gift, I think
it's probably not a gift for the people that died, is it?
Yeah, well, exactly.
Or the families,
or the families. So I think you just got to be super careful when you like execute a judgment of that scale. But then at the same time, we all know pastorally that sometimes you need to say things with a level of hyperbolic like emphasis and drama that does what it needs. Do you know what I mean? That hits the mark for a moment. And Francis Chan, who am I to criticize that? But I'm just uneasy about those kind of blanket statements. I mean, Jim, you brought it up. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit of a hot topic for me at the moment, because I'm rethinking the understanding of how God interacts with the world in general anyway. I mean, my instant thought is, if you're going to call it a gift, you've also then got to take the other side of that, and you've got to own up to the fact that you think God has caused the death of all these people too. So I don't think you can have it both ways. But I'm more inclined to think that something's happened, and then through the use of humans, that God can turn that into something positive and turn it into a gift.
Yeah.
Let me just throw a curveball in. And I'm not asking this because this is my personal thought. It's really interesting. I find that we've got this need to make it very positive. And I don't know if you watch any of Bill Maher, American comedian, and I think he's being very honest about all of this. And I think, he doesn't believe in God or anything, but if I was to kind of come from a Bill Maher Christian perspective, I know on podcasts they can see me do the hand thing,
the air quotes,
Christian, but I kind of feel, actually, rather than trying to put a positive spin on it, does it, if we're going to say, well, this is a gift from God to make us like this and to do this and to do this, could it equally not be, if you're going to think on it that way, a judgment for human actions, in that the way we treat animals, the way we do our trading, and you just think of just for an example, environmentalists a few months ago blocking the streets in London, wanting planes to be landed, wanting people to go home and not travel in cars, and then this comes along. Could this not be not just a gift, and I think actually there is a sense in which there is always redeeming features in judgment. I think could that not be part of the conversation? That
Yeah.
To be honest, that might be the way that I would naturally go.
Yeah.
But perhaps a difference in some of the language that we use, like, and it might just be a language thing, but I mean, you guys are more of the theologians than me, but it seems to me that a lot of the times where people were using language of judgment throughout the Old Testament, you kind of trace that back, and it was actually caused by a human or a group of humans in some way doing something that created a consequence of some sort, whether that be like bad policy which led to armies coming to take you over. And I think it's the same kind of thing here. Like, if you want to call it judgment, I'm not sure about that, but because you trace it back and you say, well, we know how it happened, or
so
at least there's good ideas of how it happened. Through, in China and things. So,
well, if you're gonna frame it as a gift with such certainty, why not frame it with judgment? And for cards on the table, I would say it's part of the hidden will of God. I don't know it. I don't know what it is. I do know we live in a fallen world, and that for my take on it is that this world is already under a curse, and there are things in this world, built into this world, which are unpleasant and part of an order that will one day pass away. But this specific thing, I don't know what it is. I don't know what God's purpose in allowing it is.
So it's interesting you raised Ecclesiastes, Steve. So one of the things that's been kicked around for a long time is the notion of what's the German Tung Irgendwann, which is, I've probably butchered the language there, but it's excuse me, bless you. It's the act consequence principle, like a nexus between when a deed occurs, that there is this equal and opposite reaction. And the argument has been batted around backwards, and a lively scholarly debate around whether that's something inbuilt into the universe intentionally by a create. And the funny thing is it seems like Kohelet, the character of Ecclesiastes, is disputing this, because he can see plenty of breakages in this connection between cause and effect, or deed and action, or sin and error, sin and punishment, and right conduct and reward. Like the rich man, the wealthy man dies and hands on to a fool. The guy who's lived an upright life dies early, but the sinful guy, who does everything he wants to do, has a long, prolonged life. All of this stuff, this mystery that sits in Kohelet's frustrations around how do we make sense of the world we live in, I think it is the very stuff of of faith. Actually, it's like the wrestle of how we navigate our way through this. And perhaps we shouldn't be so concerned with arriving at a settled conclusion, but back to what we were talking about last week, is about a formation of character. Who are we becoming through this? And that would be, for me, is like the judgment thing. If you want to use a language of judgment, again, I think possibly a personality thing or a semantic issue. But for me, I was like, how am I being restored to full humanity here, like Christ-like humanity? Like through this, how might God be working on me? And I suppose you could redeem the language of judgment away from retributive punishment, because I think that's where people get upset, right? That's where the rub comes on a statement like, this is God's judgment, because what that sounds like is innocent people are being punished by a deity. That's in the kind of contemporary common imagination, and I think that unsettles people. Whereas if we said God is restoring and rebalancing and challenging us to think anew, because if it's just retributive, if it's just purely like I'm doing this, then what's the point? What's the point? It just seems to me like.
But then, if you take the gift language, that this is here to humble us, this is here to realign our thinking. You go with Koheleth, the teacher in Ecclesiastes. His response to that would be, well, what about the righteous man who is already doing those things, and his wife gets this disease and dies?
Yeah.
How's that a gift to him?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in it, so it's an interesting one to talk about then how we resolve that particular book, because there's some tension in that, because at in conclusion you've got this whole thing of, the teacher said all this wise stuff, his words, they're painful words, there is truth in them, there's a reality about them. But I say to you, my son, after the making of many books, blah, 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 the wearying impact of study and words and whatnot, the way you live through this is by fearing God and obeying. And I think there's a language of covenant and judgment and teaching and all that stuff that's about forming this child, this son, to be able to make it through both the mystery of life and the pain of life in some way. I know I'm kind of, this is on the edge of my thinking, I suppose, in that we've all got to reckon with this somehow. Is there a possibility for some of us to experience this as gift and some of us to experience this as judgment? I think yes. I think there's possibility for that. But to leave it in the category of mystery, I think is probably the wisest. It's probably the wisest thing to do. And judge it all on a case by case basis. Because, like, from a pastoral perspective, someone comes in and says, "My father's just died." I'm not going to turn around to that person and say that was the judgment of God. That's just foolishness. But then similarly, you don't then go in the other side. You sit with them in the mystery, and what's Kohelet's words. All of this is a chasing after the wind. Like we won't catch it. We won't get the answer. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's where we have to settle it. I don't know. Jim, what do you think?
Well, I just think it's an extraordinarily bold statement.
Yeah,
and I think, if we're saying we need to, it always takes a lot of nuance. We need to really think carefully about these things, and we might not even know the answer. Then I just think you need to avoid big statements like that. Really. And we don't. To be fair, we don't know the context of this. It doesn't sound like he's talking to a very small particular group of people. I mean, it sounds like it's intended for a large audience.
It's like a Christian Post
it is the Christian Post. So perhaps I'm trying to give him a bit too much leeway. I'm just always really cautious about big statements like that. I really am.
Yeah. And I can I just one concluding thought, just because it's fresh in my mind. So we're working through as a church the book of Philippians at the moment, and just struck afresh by Paul's indifference to death. Like if I live, great, I get to continue serving Christ, I get to continue building these communities of faith. If I die, I'm at peace. I'm at peace with Christ in whatever. He doesn't go into any detail about what that actually means, but this kind of just a contentment in all situations. And I think if I'm this is probably bold, because I'm not fresh out of a bereavement, so like I've experienced them, painfully so, and And so I would, whoever, if anyone is listening to this and please be patient with what I'm saying here. But I think our culture has become so fearful of death, which is actually part of the fundamental Christian message, to overturn that fear of death. Mm-hmm. So I want to temper all of this by saying there is a fate worse than that, which we will get onto, I'm sure, in other podcasts.
Then what?
There's a fate worse than death, I think, which is to experience something that is not living, which I know that's a complex thing to say and possibly a bit contradictory, but I don't view death. I might have to edit this down, mate.
Start again.
There's a living death, I think, that people can experience that is worse than the singular moment.
Right.
Does that make sense? Like, there's a way of living your life. Paul's language is the wages of sin are. If you continue to sow in this manner, you're going to reap a quality of life that is not going to bring all of the benefits of life. It's just going to bring a kind of Walking Dead kind of situation. I think there's something there around, and largely inspired by a conversation I had with a doctor not too long ago. She was saying that we've just created a culture of death anxiety, where the attempt to preserve life at all costs is actually detrimental to the very quality of life that people could have, And I think there's a spiritual reality possibly about that when we so fear death, we end up living with a decreased quality of life. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense.
Good.
So I guess we should try to bring this to a close. And I realise that that's a big topic just to throw in there towards the end. So sorry about that. But I know it's something that people are saying a lot within the church world. Possibly just, like a coping mechanism, I guess. When you don't know what's going on.
I had to shut it down. In my church. So I had an incident. This was like the week before lockdown. I went to the back of the church, and there was a conversation happening, and one individual was just like mouthing off, and I get quite cross about stuff like this because of where I'm at with it, and where I think actually unnecessary, unhelpful stuff has come in theologically. And they were just mouthing off, man, about this is God's judgment, this is like end times. I was like, man, this guy's basically got the Schofield Reference Bible just memorized. So he's got loads of references from that. That's a whole history. I'm not going there. But you could see the fear on the people that he'd gathered round him talking about this. And I'm like, I don't want them going home, sleeping in their bed, going to sleep at night, wondering whether God is for them or against them. It's like, these aren't the promises of Scripture. So I was just like, I really went both barrels on this guy. I feel a little bit bad because I was like, look, I'm just going to ask you to stop talking because this is crap. I said, and I turned to the people around, I said, with all due respect, this type of theology is not even worth the conversation. So we're going to stop this right now, and you will hear me say, perfect love casts out fear, right? And if your relationship with God is growing and developing in love, then there should be a decreasing experience of fear in your relationship with him, not an increase. So if this is making you more fearful, then it's not grounded in appropriate theology. It's not life-giving. It's not life. I was just like, we're not doing this, man. That's not happening. If I've got a good enough relationship with this guy for him to for us to banter about it later. So it wasn't like a complete pastoral put down. I didn't it wasn't like call the police, there's been a murder. It was just dealt with there and then, because you could just see the fear in people. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
people live with this stuff all the time. I think this is probably the biggest, and worth another episode. I would say this is one of the biggest pastoral issues I face. It's like people being afraid of God, like in a really unhealthy way. It's like,
Yeah.
you seem to have missed the story of Jesus somewhere in all of this.
Welcome to my childhood.
Well, yeah, I remember sharing a room with you, man. Like,
Yeah, we'll go into that another time.
yeah, we will. We should go there if you're okay. You can be all right with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Great.
Okay,
One of the best things I've heard,
go on, it's good.
and one of the most helpful things I heard was on a Zoom session about preachers and how they ought to be reacting to this pandemic. And the guy on there said, he was using Jesus walking on the water during the storm, and he gets to them. They're fearful to begin with, and then he speaks to them and says, "It's me. Don't be afraid." And the preacher made the comment. The guy leading the study made the comment. To preachers, and he did it very well and very bluntly. Stop preaching about the storm and start preaching into the storm. In terms of actually they need to hear words of comfort, words about Jesus that are good for them to hear, not look at all the turmoil around us. Actually, we've got a hope that we can offer that is better than the storm. And I think a lot of people are just making the mistake of preaching about the storm.
Yeah.
So that was helpful.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah. Is there any anything that you guys would recommend people to read around this type of thing that we could link to? Any useful resources or anything?
Well, I think, having quoted Lewis, I think it's worth going and reading his book, The Problem of Pain. It's worth having a look at. He's a thoughtful writer and speaker.
Yeah, and I would add his book on A Grief Observed, particularly for those that are going through bereavements. Like, it's his documentation, his journey, his journal, in the wake of the loss of his wife, and it's the best, most honest journey through that season of life that I've ever read, and there's a wealth of resource there for people. So Lewis, absolutely. If I'm honest, I always feel disgruntled with 100 questions that you wanted to ask God, or 10 questions about because I read those and I'm like, yeah, this is such a condensed form of what needs to be said. There's never going to be enough nuance in it. And so read things that are going to point you to mystery, like the mystics, the saints that are happy to leave things unanswered but have a good crack at talking about it. I think is, get used to navigating mystery if you're going to be pursuing faith. That would be my take.
So I guess from me, one of the books that made a big impact, if you're going down that route of fear of God and things that Dan was talking about earlier on, Sinners in the Hands of a Loving God.
Oh, Brian Zand. Excellent.
Yeah, really good. So I'll put that in the notes too. Bit of variation from C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, very good.
Wicked. Okay. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Pleasure, as always.
And see you next week.
Next week.
See you then.
So thank you for listening to another episode of our podcast and hanging around again to the end. If you have any feedback, then we'd love to hear it. We really want to make sure that this is as helpful for you as possible. So get in touch if you've got anything that you think we could do better. Remember to follow us on our social media channels. The links for those are in the description. And we'll see you next time.
This is going somewhere I don't like.